Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. And if you're a true General Hospital fan, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started with today's video. Willow stooped low in the dim living room, her fingers tracing the border of a muddy footprint that should not have been. The residence was meant to be empty. Before she began packing, she investigated every room, closet, and shadowed nook. Suitcases lay open on the floor, half full of Wiley and Amelia's clothes, passports slipped into a side pocket, cash and burner phones previously secured. In her despair, she devised a simple plan: grab what she could, collect the children, and flee before anyone in Port Charles noticed. Nina had gone too far by the lake. The black box was finally in reach, but the timing had failed. Everything was collapsing, and the only choice left was flight. She flattened her palm on the chilly floor, attempting to make sense of the print. It was huge and hefty, like the footprint left by a man's shoe after trudging across moist earth. No rain had fallen that evening. The water was miles distant. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she slowly rose, the home suddenly too quiet. The front door smashed shut after her, rattling the glass. Willow turned around. Drew stood in the foyer, dripping water on the hardwood. His garments clung to him, black and thick. Mud stained his trousers and shirt cuffs. His hair was stuck to his forehead. He stood straight. He was walking. And when he glanced at her, his eyes were clear, keen, and filled with something colder than the lake water still dripping down his sleeves. For a long time, neither of them talked. Willow's mind raced through every potential explanation before discarding them all. The paralytic had been gone for several days. Sidwell was in custody. The supply line was cut. She knew the danger was increasing, but she still believed she had time. Time to go, time to hide the truth, time to protect the children from the man who had once given her the world and then helped take it away. That man was now standing in her living room, no longer confined to a body incapable of moving or speaking. Drew moved one step forward. The floor creaked beneath his weight. Willow's breath caught. She backed up till her legs touched the edge of the sofa. Her hand reached immediately for the side table, where she kept a tiny emergency kit, but she paused. There was no syringe left to help her now. There was no medicine potent enough to reverse what was happening. He spoke, and the sound of his voice after months of solitude was almost as startling as his appearance. 7 words. "I know you shot me, Willow." The words struck like a physical blow. 7 simple words, each one exact and spoken without excessive volume or theatrical flourish. It is just a fact. Just the truth. It was the end of every carefully built lie she had been living for the past half-year. Willow opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her knees were about to give. The room tilted. She had confessed to him once before, when he was helpless and blinking was his only language, when she bent over his bed and told him the truth, knowing he would never use it against her. She had seen his eyes widen with recognition and wrath, while his body remained motionless. She had assured herself that being locked in was permanent enough. She had convinced herself that even if the medicine ran out, the stroke damage would keep him silent. She had been incorrect. Drew took another stride. Water trickled from his sleeve on the floor between them. "You thought the lake would finish what the bullet started," he replied, his voice still low and controlled. Nina pushed the chair. "You packed the bags. Same result either way." "I didn't." Willow's voice broke. She forced breath into her lungs. "I had no idea she was going to do that. I was attempting to leave. I was trying to protect the kids from what? From the truth? From the man their mother attempted to assassinate so that she could continue to play congresswoman and loyal mother simultaneously?" He got closer. The fragrance of lake water and mud permeated the area between them. "You gave me injections for months. You sat by the bed, smiling for Scout, while I was caught inside my own head. You said you shot me as if it were a gift of truth. And when the medicine ran out, you intended to flee." Willow's hands shook. She tightened them into fists at her sides. "You ruined everything first. You slept with my mother. You rigged the custody battle. You used Wiley. You used my life as a weapon against Michael and against me. I did what I needed to do to survive." Drew's laugh was brief and unfunny. You shot me in the back.
Twice.
Then you paralyzed me, preventing me from telling anyone. That is not survival. That's calculation. The words, "I know you shot me, Willow," echoed in her thoughts, becoming louder each time. 7 words encapsulated every secret she had hidden. 7 words that meant the police, courts, press, Michael, Scout, and the entire community would finally learn the truth from the one person who could no longer be hushed. She had spent months skillfully balancing a house of cards that included congressional obligations, public sympathy, Nina's reluctant collaboration, and Sidwell's drug supply. Drew took one breath, and the entire structure fell. She attempted to move past him toward the hallway, the stairs, and any other exit. Drew stepped sideways, blocking her path, without lifting his hands. He did not have to touch her. The fact that he could stand and speak posed a threat in itself. "You're not leaving with those children," he replied. "You're not boarding a plane. You're not going to disappear into a new persona that Brennan has set up. The black box is now with Jack. Nina is falling apart." Willow's vision clouded at the edges. Panic filled her throat like bile. She had imagined this moment in the darkest hours of the night. Drew healing, Drew remembering, Drew approaching her, but imagination never held the weight of reality. The wet footprints. The closed door. The 7 words said in a voice she once trusted but later attempted to delete. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Everything you took." His gaze never left hers. "This is my voice. My body. My daughter's trust. You determined that I no longer deserved this existence. And when the authorities ask, I'll tell them who shot me in the back and then locked me in a living tomb while she pretended to be the mourning wife." Willow's legs finally gave up. She slumped into the arm of the sofa, one hand clamped against her mouth. The luggage on the floor looked pitiful now, half-packed proof of a plan that had never had a chance once Drew walked out of that lake. She recalled Wiley's expression, Amelia's small hands, and the custody papers that had already cost her so much. She remembered pressing a syringe into Drew's neck and promising him that everything will work out. She recalled Nina's desperate call, the lake, and Gio discovering the body that should have remained beneath water. Drew remained standing, water dripping slowly on the floor. He didn't gloat. He did not raise his voice again. He merely watched her crumble beneath the weight of 7 words that could not be unspoken. "I know you shot me, Willow." The sentence had already served its purpose. Panic overtook every sensible idea she had left. There was no clear way out. She couldn't tell a story that would hold up once Drew started speaking freely. The children, the position in Congress, and the carefully crafted image of a woman victimized by powerful men were all about to burn. She stared up at him, hoping to find any softness left in the man who had once claimed to love her enough to battle the entire Quartermain family. There was none. Only the cold clarity of someone who has spent months confined inside, quiet, listening, remembering, waiting for the opportunity to go through a door and say the truth. Outside, a car door closed down the street. Distant voices drifted across the night air. Drew tilted his head slightly, listening, before returning his gaze to her. "They're going to find out," he whispered quietly. "Jack,
Dante,
Michael, Scout, everyone. And when they do, those 7 words will be all that matters." Willow exhaled sharply. Her thoughts searched for leverage, a deception big enough to control this, a threat with staying force. Nothing arrived. The muddy tracks on the floor, the open bags, and the drenched man standing between her and the door all contributed to a picture she could no longer modify. She'd shot him. She'd kept him mute. She had intended on running. And now he'd returned to her life with 7 words that had destroyed every calculation. The panic remained. It sank into her bones, cold and permanent, as Drew stood there, dripping lake water into the floor of the no longer sanctuary house, waiting for the rest of the world to arrive and hear what he had already said. Willow's hands trembled as she pushed another stack of clothes into the open suitcase on the bed. The home felt too quiet, the kind of quietness that pressed against her ears and made every small sound appear larger than it should. Wiley and Amelia were still in Lila's place. She had called ahead, keeping her voice steady, and promised to pick them up soon. New identities awaited. A plane waited. Freedom awaited, if she could only move quickly enough. She'd already packed the kids' favorite toys, the miniature photo albums she couldn't leave behind, and the documents Brennan had organized. She couldn't care less if everything else burned. Port Charles had become a cage, with the bars closing. Her earlier questioning at the PCPD had been pure theater on her part. Indignation, demands for her lawyer, and a skillfully staged portrayal of a woman being hounded for no reason. Molly and Dante had not purchased it. She saw it in their eyes. They sought answers regarding Sidwell, the meetings, and the money. She had given them nothing and moved away before the walls could close them more. She merely needed to finish packing, fetch the kids, and disappear. Nina would understand. Nina needed to comprehend. They'd come too far and accomplished too much to let it all disintegrate now. She froze as she crouched over the luggage and attempted to close a side pocket. Muddy tracks traced a distinct path across the living room floor from the front door. It does not rain mud. Lake mud. Dark, moist, and distinct. Her breath caught. Nobody should have been here. The house had been locked. She'd checked. Her fingers touched the edge of one print. It's still moist. The front door banged closed behind her. Willow spun so quickly that she almost lost her equilibrium. The figure standing in the foyer was wet through, his clothes clinging to his body and his hair dropping down the floor in continuous drops. Lake water still clung to him in rivulets that ran down his cheeks and neck. He stood without assistance, shoulders set, eyes fixed on hers with a clarity that had been lacking for months.
Drew. Alive.
Walking. Looking at her as if the previous half-year of silence and stillness had never occurred. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The bag, the plans, the names of the children, everything poured out of her consciousness in a single surge of frigid panic. He should have been at the bottom of Quartermain Lake. Nina had pushed him. The wheelchair had rolled over. He should have drowned. He should have kept quiet forever. Instead, he stood in their living room, water pooling at his feet, and his look was not the lifeless, locked-in glare she had grown accustomed to seeing. It was cold, exact rage that had been developing behind closed eyes for months as she spoke to him, confessed to him, and retained him. He moved one step forward. The wet footprints mirrored those already on the floor. Another step. Willow's back struck the edge of the bed. There was nowhere to hide. Drew's voice, when it came, was gruff from overuse, but steady enough to pierce the silence like a blade. I know you tried to kill me. Just 7 words. Exactly 7. They landed with the weight of every syringe, every coerced confession, and every night she sat beside his bed and told him the truth because she knew he could never do it again. The words hung in the air between them, and Willow felt the floor shift beneath her. Her heart pounded so hard she believed he'd hear it. The perfectly crafted universe she had created, the congressional seat, the carefully orchestrated custody battles, the protracted game she had played while he lay helpless, cracked open in an instant. He remembered. He had overheard everything. He had survived the lake and came right to her door, ready to deliver the one words that would terminate her life. She attempted to speak, but only produced a broken sound. Drew. He would not let her continue. The voice that had been reduced to rasps and blinks for so long now bore the full force of months of suppressed rage. Water spilled from his sleeve as he raised one hand and pointed at her, the movement slow and deliberate. You shot me. You kept me bound inside that body. You confessed to me as if I were already a ghost. You and your mother concluded that I was better off dead than free. And now you think you can pack a bag and flee with my daughter's step-siblings while I rot at the bottom of the lake. Willow's knees threatened to buckle. She grasped the edge of the mattress, so tightly that her nails dug into the fabric. The children. Wiley. Amelia. Scout. Everything she had done had been for them. Or so she had persuaded herself in the darkest hours when the guilt was too strong. Her romance with Drew had cost her Michael. The shooting had been intended to restore control. The paralysis, isolation, and meticulous monitoring of his recuperation were the only ways to keep the truth hidden long enough to protect her future. None of it mattered anymore.
He stood.
He was speaking. He knew. It wasn't like that, she said quietly, the lie natural and ineffective. I was protecting them. Protecting us. Drew laughed, a brief, hard sound devoid of humor. Lake water poured down his neck, soaking into his collar. Are you protecting them by making me a prisoner in my own skin? By explaining me in detail how you shot me while I couldn't blink quick enough to respond? You sat there, whispering. It was you. You spoke the words as if they gave you power.
They did.
Until the drugs ran out. Until Nina decided that drowning was better than keeping me quiet. Until I awoke in that water and realized I wasn't done yet. He took another step. The space between them shrank. Willow's mind raced through options. Run, scream, reach for a weapon, call someone. But each one led to the same dead end. He was here. He was free. The black box Jack had been looking for, the proof Brennan had failed to collect in time. None of it mattered if Drew himself could go into a police station and speak. I should have let the lake take you, she whispered, her words tumbling out before she could control them. Panic peeled away the polished congresswoman, revealing just the woman who had spent months calculating every danger. Nina was correct. We should have finished it when we had the chance, Drew said, his gaze narrowing. For a moment, the only sound was the steady drip of water from his garments on the floor. Then he spoke again, softer and more menacing. You still do not understand. I am not here to bargain. I don't want to hear another speech about how all you did was for the children. You took my voice. You took my body. You took months of my life and utilized them to create your escape plan. Willow breathed in short, rapid bursts. She could see the bag still open on the bed, the children's clothes neatly put inside, and the fresh passports tucked into a side pocket. Everything is now useless. The plane would depart without them. The new identities would not be used. The life she had been striving toward vanished the moment those muddy tracks appeared on the floor. What are you planning to do? She inquired, knowing full well that the response would break her last ounce of equanimity. Drew wiped a trace of wetness from his cheek with the back of his palm. The motion seemed almost nonchalant, as if he had all the time in the world. I am going to walk out of this house and tell everyone who needs to know exactly what you did. The shooting happened. The medicines. The confessions. The way you smirked when you informed me that I would never recover. Nina pushes into the lake. All of it. And when the cops come for you, Michael discovers the truth, and Scout discovers who her stepmother truly is, you will finally understand what it's like to be trapped with no way out. The 7 words echoed again in her mind. I know you tried to kill me, and with them came the full weight of every decision that had led to this point. The affair began as a source of comfort, but quickly devolved into a disaster. With the revolver in her grasp, everything changed that night. She shoved a syringe into his neck while he trusted her. Long evenings of monologues delivered to a man who could only hear. She had assumed the hush was forever. She had hoped that the lake would resolve the last loose end. She had been wrong on all counts. Willow's legs eventually gave. She slumped to the edge of the bed, the open suitcase pressing against her hip. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not while he was still standing there, pouring lake water into the floor of the house they had previously shared. The children, she murmured quietly.
Please.
Don't do this to them. Drew's expression did not change. You've already done this to them. Every falsehood, every deception, every time you prioritized power over the truth. I'm simply going to make sure they get to see it. He turned toward the door. Willow considered leaving without saying anything else, that the confrontation would finish with those 7 words and the threat of ultimate annihilation. Instead, he halted with his hand on the door and gave her one more glance. Pack all you want, he urged. It will not matter. There is nowhere left for you to flee. The door closed behind him with a faint click that was louder than the previous slam. Willow sat still on the bed, staring at the muddy trail he'd left on the floor. The suitcase remained opened. The children's clothes waited. The phone in her pocket included Brennan's phone number as well as information for a flight that would never transport them to safety. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, Drew was already moving.
Alive.
Speaking. remembering. And the 7 things he had said in that peaceful living room would haunt her for the rest of her life, no matter how far she tried to flee. She reached for the phone with trembling fingers, then paused. Who could she call? Nina was already compromised. Brennan's plan failed when the paralytic ran out. Michael would never aid her anymore. The police would merely confirm what Drew was about to tell them. There was no one remaining.